So, Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity we have to be gathered together with you as your children, as your opportunity to continue to teach and educate and to continue to inform us of the things that you have laid forth in your word, things that you have done before time, and how you have created and made things, and how you have destroyed things, and how you have renewed and restored things. And we just thank you so much for all the lessons that we learned and continue to look into trusting in you. But also, Father, we know that we're in this time of our lives, that we go through this life in the physical and emotional time stamp of past, present, and future realities. We have pains and anguishes and trials and hardships and emotional traumas and physical and just spiritual challenges. We ask that you continue to help and guide and direct. Think of Laney, my babes, and Pam's mom, and the situations regarding extended family and all peoples involved. But just through all of us, God, you know that we are your children, you are our Father, and you know what is needed best. We know that you orchestrate all things, and you've ordained it all to be in our benefits, to see the benefits and blessings of your hand and of your will in our lives, regardless of how we think and feel and experience it at the time. It's hard, painful, heartbreaking, and just frustrating. And we ask that you continue to help to guide through all of those emotions, to navigate most of all your spirit of the fruit of love and peace, your love, to help us understand and see your hand of what you provided and what you've given as a blessing and benefit through it all, because of it all. We just ask continually in that same sense, in that same vein, that here's Noah now hearing a word from you that all of humanity and the living things would be destroyed. And just he, his family, and a couple of these animals that you have put on this ark were the only ones who were spared. What a news flash to get for him, to know for 100 years he had to deal with that heartache, that emotional heart, that upsetness that he would have to have, knowing that it's only going to be a few. And all these people, all these living things be destroyed by your hand. Lord, we are beyond understanding why you do things the way you do things. But we know that it's best. We know that you love us. And we know that you are not a vindictive and vengeful God in the sense of bringing back things to say, I told you so, but your vengeance is to uphold your righteousness. Your judgment is to uphold your holiness, and we know that we are accountable and responsible. We ask that also we cling to your peace and your love and your forgiveness and your restoration. And we thank you for always providing a way when there is no way, and always making a remnant be those who can see it through, to always make sure your truth is being told, that you do love and you do care. So Father, be with us now as our counselor, our pastor, our teacher, our guide, our director, our everything, our coming bridegroom, and just teach us, educate us, and correct us and edify us in the teaching of your word to this day. May the words of my mouth, meditations of my heart be acceptable, Lord, in your sight. May we all be edified again into the reading and understanding of your scripture. In Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. I know there's quite a bit to pray about there, so I know there's a lot of on everybody's minds. So I just wanted to, again, thank you also for allowing us to have the Fridays off for a little bit, because in the early summer break, it's harder at nighttime for Nancy to get the physical demands going, so it's easier to transition. Want to just call it an early break. That's what we did that for, and I thank you for that. So we're still going to be having Sundays, obviously. And so again, for online purposes, we are going to be canceling the ARC. We are. I mean, I guess if some people have to go, they have to go. If you can't cancel, but we just, with the things going on, I at first thought I was able to do that, but then with Nancy's physical recovery process, I don't want to push it and cause some undue situations regarding getting things back into alignment with her spine from the whole jarring accident. So thought it'd be a better situation, but I guessed on that, and that's on me, so I apologize. But I just want to make sure that you know that we really can't go forward with that, and a good piece of it. So with that being said, that laundry list of things there, I want to make sure that we go into the scripture piece of this and look at the aspect of Noah's Ark. And we're still going to cover it, even though we're not going to experience it. We're still going to cover it, and that is to see the things that are regarding what it is that this whole story is about. So before we get started into the whole situation, you have to get a background. And I will tell you that this chart that I gave you, the world history chart, there's some dates that have to be changed. So if you have that, I'm going to get you a new one, but if you want to, and ahead of time, if you're wondering, like, gosh, how'd you make the mistake? Because I'm human and I made a mistake. So, and the main reason why is because I got to tell you, the whole BC thing, whenever I'm doing dates between A and B, I'm just being honest with you, just throwing myself out there on the sword. When I'm doing dates from A to B, I have a tendency of always being, I don't know, it's like dyslexia or something. I want to add dates. I want to add. When you're not supposed to do that. When you're trying to distinguish between two different dates, you subtract when you're doing BC. Well, I was adding, So, you know what I mean? So when you're on the other side of the timeline, you do add. You're saying, hey, from point A to point B, how many years went by? So then you add that, right? Well, you don't do that in BC. You subtract. Well, that's the reason my dates are wrong. Just being honest about why it is. So in other words, the flood on your chart, it says it was in 3718 BC. Not true. It was actually in 3344 BC. That's what I have on the board. And you may say, well, how do I know that? Well, because Adam he died in 4076, and when he died 126 years before Noah was even born. And then when you have that reality of that situation, that's how you can do some math. You just simply take the genealogy of chapter 5, and you start adding it up, and you find out that Adam, the first man, died 126 years prior to Noah. Until you just simply, that's how you know when the flood was. You just do the math from there. He was 500 years old when God called him, which was 3444. Then the flood was 3344. I just made a mistake on adding and subtracting because I was, yes?
Vicky said what chart number?
It's like, I don't know the number. I think it's like 3 or 4. It's in the early part, maybe 3 or 4. It's in the first part, old history. But I'm going to get you a new one because I have to.
Laney said 3.
Yeah. So, which means from Adam to Shem, that's also off. It should be 1556. That's how many years went by from Ha-Adam to Shem. From Shem to Abram, a little off there too, should be 1293. So this whole domino effect is just, I'm sorry, it's on me. And then when it says, that's on your right side of your chart. But I'm gonna get you a new one. And then from Abraham's calling, that was not 2079, it's more like 1976 BC. And then Joseph's days, I had that way off. It should be from 1800 to 1690. So again, I just got it botched because of the adding versus subtracting, and that's on me. So again, that's what that, but again, you don't have to write, if you remember those, but I'm just letting you know offhand those are the errors. But I'll fix those on a chart and make sure you're aware of the accuracy of that. All right, so, but the reason that we are looking at Noah's Ark originally was because we're going to be seeing it physically, we thought, right? And we just can't, on our state, can't be able to make that trip. But at this point, anyway, hopefully soon we can do that again. Hopefully later on this year, who knows? So the reality is that we have, the first things first is the timeline. Again, like I said, Ha-Adam died, I said 470 BC, actually. What did I say, 476 before? It was actually 4. So he died, if I said that right? 476. Is that what it should be? Did I do it right? Maybe.
So actually, I guess the creation was closer to 5000 BC.
It was, correct. Mm-hmm. That's on the chart that way, and the reason why that is we found before there were some missing years in chapter 11 of the actual process of the genealogy. And just to make sure you remember this, I know it's been a while. So here, let me tell you, I'm going to find out. I believe, I didn't bring the other chart. I think it was 40. So Adam lived 930 years. So he didn't, yeah, I said 4076, my mistake. It's actually 4070. That's 930. 470 years. So I said 76, I was wrong. 4070 BC. So the years and why people say, well, wait, I thought the whole world was 4000 BC to Christ, and then Christ to now is 2000, right? So here's the, make sure you remember this, and this is a rabbit trail we're not going to go down deep on, but just to remind you, we did this before.
So if Adam is 4070 BC death, then that would mean that 5000 BC was the creation.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Well, it was the time in which, here's the interesting part, it was the time in which from Genesis chapter 1, from the day 4 onward, it's definitively 5000 BC. Before that time, those weren't day and night days like we see them now. That was retroactively seen that way, but definitively the day number 4 onward were 24-hour days as we see them. The previous 3 days were not literally at the time 24 hours. We see that retroactively because of what God called a day. So that's a little different conversation. But to make sure we know, on Luke chapter 3, if you look in, to remind you of the genealogy and why there's a problem with the years and why people say, how'd you get from 4,000 to 5,000? Here's why, to remind you. In Luke chapter 3, in the genealogy of Christ, it says in verse 35 and 36, the son of Surug, the son of Rud, the son of Peleg, the son of Eber, the son of Selah, the son of Canaan, the son of Arphaxad, the son of Shem, the son of Noah, and so forth. That's where in the Old Testament it skips over Canaan, if you remember. It doesn't even list him in the Old Testament. So you look over to Genesis chapter 11. We're off topic a little bit, but still in the same time frame. In Genesis 11 and verse 11 and 12, 11 of chapter Genesis, chapter 11, verse 11, Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years. So he was 100 years off the ark. 2 years later, he begats Arphaxad. So he was 102 when he had Arphaxad. He lived 500 years more. He lived 602 years. That was the longest anybody ever lived post-flood. After the flood, no one lived beyond 600 years other than Shem. After Shem, that's it. No one lived over 600. Everybody lived less than that. And then by the time you get Abraham on the scene, or Abram on the scene, no one after that lived beyond 200 years. So his father lived just over 200, Terah, and then he was dead. Which, by the way, Terah was in the land of Ur of the Chaldees when Abram left, and he was left alone for 60 years. If you want to know how I know that, you just do the math. He was 70 when Abraham was born to him. Abram was born to him. Abram was 75 when he actually was called by God. And Terah was 205 when he died. You just do the math. 205 minus, the 70 years of age Terah was, plus the 75 Abraham was when God called him. So you add 145 minus 205 is 60. So there were 60 years Terah was alone from his son. His son left his father. And by the way, no mention of him ever going back, saying, "Hi, Dad, I hope you're doing well." There was none of that. I'm not saying that's cold-blooded. I'm just saying people who sometimes put an inference in there that, you're supposed to always give. He was gone. There was no record of him going back and saying, "Hey, Dad, how you doing? Just want to come back and say hello." It's not, not that he didn't love his dad. It's just that there was no sense of that being recorded. Nor did God ever say to do that. So even though we know later on, God says to honor your mother and father, there's a time and place where God does have a people be called. In this case, he told him to leave his kindred. So going back to Genesis chapter 11, you'll have Shem begat Arphaxad. Then it goes right from Arphaxad to Selah. No mention of Canaan. All you got to do is read it. Just don't believe me. You read it. In Genesis chapter 11, verses 11 through 13. No mention of Canaan, but yet the book of Luke says, oh, yes, there is a Canaan. In the Septuagint, there is a Canaan. Interesting, because we know the Septuagint is more accurate in its context, but the word study you can't do, unfortunately, from the book of the Septuagint, from the books in the Septuagint. So the Septuagint is the older Hebraic language translated into the Greek, which then translated into the English, and that was the book that was the restorative aspect of what unfortunately was destroyed, the original Hebraic scriptures that it was taken from, were destroyed in Titus AD 70, and that's why we don't have that text anymore to do word studies from. But the Septuagint is what Yeshua used it himself, and so he referenced it, and so it is a valid reference tool for context and for God's word, and that's why it's important. Case in point, this is how you get the other bit of years, and then you go, wait a second, because now there's more years involved than what you think.
How
Yes.
could the Septuagint be there? Because in Jesus' time, that the original Hebrew would have been available before the destruction.
It would have been, but the Septuagint was transliterated because remember the people at the time, he referenced that because of the time it was used from the original language. And so even though they had the original language, to your point, a lot of people were Hellenized, and the Sanhedrin was birthed out of that. So the Sanhedrin was using a lot of that because that's where they got their power from, was they birthed the Septuagint. They're the ones who instituted that. So it's almost like saying, like the King James Version only Bible, like today, for perfect example today, we have a dialogue. It's more accurate. But let's face reality. A lot of people that are knowing of the kingdom are still kind of lean toward that King James Version because it's just tradition. It's what they were first introduced. It's what they first saw things in the Bible. Before you knew about a dialogue and knowing kingdom things, you saw things in the King James. And so because of that, they use the concordance with the King James. Everything's tied to the King James, the concordance, lexicons, and all that. So they tend to use the King James because of the tradition and what was birthed out of their normalcy of how they began to teach and educate people. The Sanhedrin came out of, they're the ones who introduced the Septuagint. Those group of people were the premise, they were the foundation of what became later the Sanhedrin. The 70 men who did that were the ones who later on became the Sanhedrin. They became the core of who that people were. So they used the Septuagint quite a bit, so Jesus used it to reference those people's reference to that. Although, to your point, they went back to the Hebraic, just like we do. I'll use the King James from time to time, like this is the King James, right? But they'll use the Old Semitic Hebrew as well. So there's no doubt about that aspect to your point. Great point. So they're going to use the Old Semitic Hebrew for language, but for context, that's why, like in the book of Job, it mentions how he was tied to Edomites later on. You'll see in Esther, there was mention of God. You'll see with Cain, he premeditated the death of his brother. There's a lot of things in the Septuagint you would not get in the King James. It adds a lot of flavor in there that you wouldn't see. In this case, we've studied before that it does a timeline adjustment by mentioning Canaan. You say, oh, you can't count that. Septuagint's garbage. Whoa, 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 whoa. The New Testament's not garbage, and it mentions Canaan all day long. It's right there in Luke chapter 3, verse 35, 36. So either the New Testament's wrong or the King James is wrong. Unfortunately, the New Testament is part of the King James, so guess what? The Old Testament's wrong in the King James Version, which means that you don't have the context, which means if I can't trust that context of those lineage, that whole lineage is off, right? That's why the years are all different too, if you remember. I'll do that. All the years are different.
Now, how could one person make 1,000 years difference? I mean, put it from 4,000 back to 5,000.
It's not just him. It's what I mentioned earlier. It's the fact that, for example, to your point, it's because of this. And when you go and you compare the lifespan of all the people born in chapter 11, it's different from the King James to the Septuagint. Their lifespans are all different. That's what's different. The lifespans are different. So when you compare Genesis 11 from the Septuagint to the King James, you start having a lot of differences in years. And you're like, oh my goodness gracious. So what's going on here? So that's where the 1,000 years, there's other things too that come into play with that. So yes.
And then Archbishop Usher wouldn't have used the Septuagint, he would have used the King James, I guess. The guy that said 4,000 BC.
Oh, I don't know about him. Yeah, I don't know. But so that's the preface. So now we go back to in Genesis, and it's going to be easier for me just to do this. It's going to look crude, but I'm going to do this. Just take a piece of paper. My Bible's falling apart. So I'm going to do this. So this looks so bad. So anyway, but this is, if you're wondering, if you're seeing me, this came out of my Bible, but it is the Bible. Trust me. It just fell out. So I'm just going to use it. So in Genesis, in chapter, it's actually easy to hold, by the way. But in Genesis, in chapter 5, you'll see in chapter 5, in verse 29, it says that he called his name Noah. This is Lamech had a son. Called his name Noah, and this same one will comfort us, he says. This means will bring consolation to us concerning our work, what we do, and our toil, our hard labor of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. And Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years. He begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech was 777, and he died. And Noah was a son of 500 years old, and begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so here we have the three sons of Noah. And the way in which it says that he begat them, it sounds like they're triplets, excuse me. I say triplets, because they're all born, it seems like, the same day. So when you look at, later on, I'm going to show you some things on here. Let me show you some things here on the dates of this. So a couple of points to look at for reference. So Enoch, by the way, Enoch was taken up. Enoch was taken up into heaven 69 years prior to the flood. Now, that is rather interesting to me, because if you just do the math on the timeline of the genealogy, you'll figure this out, by the way, which I did it for you. So that means that, think about it, he's just short of 70 years. Doesn't that seem ironic to you? That Noah's typology of being brought through a time of trouble, being a type of tribulation, and tribulation is known as the 70th week of Daniel, and Enoch was taken up the 69th year, 1 year prior to the 70th year. It's just interesting to me that it would speak to a rapture, a taking up of people prior to, but not everybody, prior to the flood. Also, another iconic issue here is you have Seth died. Seth was actually alive Seth died at 14 years before, he died 14 years before Noah's birth. So Seth, Adam's replacement son for Abel, if you will, he died 14 years prior to the flood.
Oh, you said
Up to the flood, for Noah, sorry, before Noah, to flood. Prior to Noah being born, my apology. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, the 69 years for Enoch, remember, a year in the womb, the Jewish baby counted a year old when he's born. There's
Yeah.
70, right?
Yeah. Yep, 70, yep. And then you have, and this is an interesting thing. Now remember now, in Enos was the son of Seth. Now, if you remember on Enos, going back to chapter 4 of Genesis, and it says, and Seth to him, chapter 4 of Genesis, verse 26, and to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. And this word call is in the infinitive case, in the accusative case. So when you call upon someone in the accusative case, it has the inference of mocking, right? And so, interesting enough, Enos, actually, in scriptural premise here, the time, Enos, by the way, Enos died 153 years after Enoch was taken up. So I find that interesting because of the fact that it's been like a splinter in the mind of many people, considering myself, that the whole aspect of the 153 fish mentioned in John, if you go back to John in chapter 21, remember that? It's always been like, what is that number for? It's so odd. What's that number? It relates to nothing whatsoever at all.
I've heard it relates to at the end, the 153 distinct nations, and then Israel, the miracle nation.
Well,
now, you said Enos died 153 years after
Enoch was taken.
But Enoch was taken up 69 years prior to the flood. It sounds like you're saying Enos after the flood he didn't. So.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I say this right? I should say, sorry.
Before
No, not the flood. See, I'm in this, Mick. Gosh, dog it. Sorry, thank you. Prior to Noah's birth. I'm sorry.
So Enos died 153 years.
Before Noah's birth, not the flood. I'm sorry. I'm misspeaking. I'm misspeaking. I'm sorry. Thank you. I apologize. Yes?
Eleni said repeat that, please.
So, okay, so Enos was the one who began after Seth was the replacement godly son to Abel, who was killed by Cain, obviously. Then Seth had Enos. And when Enos, in chapter 4 of 26, he began to men began to call upon the name. It's written in the text as it's written in the initiative, it's in the accusative grammar case, infinitive case, accusative, which means that obviously it's inflicting upon, so it has like a mocking connotation to it. So in Enos' day, they began to mock God. Well, no coincidence, my apology about saying flood, I meant Noah's birth. Enoch was taken up 69 years before Noah's birth. Seth died 14 years prior to Noah's birth. Then Enos died 150 years after Enoch was taken up. And so the 150 years between Enoch being taken up and 153 years later Enos dies, it speaks to that he was the beginning of when men started to mock him. And so then God was going to put an end. Obviously, it was like a reference. The 153 years was a reference to God saying it began with him. And I wanted you to have an earmark between the rapture of Enoch, for example, 153 years later of Enos, the days of men mocking will be over. And it was earmarked by these many years. Which, interesting enough, in here, in the book of John, when he says to Peter in John 21:11, Simon Peter went on board and drew the net to the land, full of great fishes, and 153, and though there were so many, the net was not torn. So I think it's interesting how here it's almost as if, remember, what was happening at this time? The Jewish Sanhedrin was mocking the resurrection of Jesus. They were lying and saying he did not rise from the dead. How interesting is this, that they were mocking the resurrection of Jesus? They were mocking the fact that it is not true, it is not real, you've made it up, you stole his body. They were mocking the apostles later on. You're just fishermen, you're dumb, idiot people. What do you know? So all of this stuff of the mocking of God's people was, I think, not coincidence when God uses fish in a net to represent the same number of years. So what's the difference? Enoch was taken up. 153 years later, he put an end to the man who began the mocking post-Cain. Then he has Peter, during the mocking of what's happening of his resurrection, post-resurrection, he pulls up 153 fish as if to show, again, that that's the number of the days of mocking, because there was a 50 days of mocking, if you remember, or 50 days of from Passover to Pentecost. Then you have another 103 days going in to meet 153 days if you're going to match, well, those years actually, Enos' case. But you have this time frame in which Peter began to really blossom and bloom into this process of where he was confronted, and there was no longer, remember, he got a lot of moxie when they were confronted later on by the Sanhedrin and saying, I'm not going to be here before God and pleasing you. I got to please man before you. I got to please God, between him and John being there to recall those stories. So this, I believe, speaks to this similitude of the end of a time of mocking and 153 years, which is preceded by a catching up. One was a rapture in Enoch's case, and one was a resurrection in Jesus' case. He was caught up into heaven. He was taken up, it says in Scriptures. Speaking of not just the resurrection, but his ascensions. He had ascended many times before this already. So he had resurrected and he was ascending 4 times, remember? So this was in between the second and fourth time. So the fourth time he ascended was in Acts, and the third time he ascended was after this occurrence. So it speaks to, again, a resurrection and ascension's already happened, but 2 more were yet to be here, and he gives them 153 fish. I think it's just more interesting about what a coincidence that Enos died that many years after Enoch was taken up. I don't find that to be coincidence. I'm just saying. It's not coincidence that he died that many years after a catching up. Yes?
Vicky said Seth named his so-called son Seth so that Enosh would mock the Lord and set up a future purpose toward Jesus.
I'm sorry. I'm misunderstood. What did that say again?
Seth named his son, so did Seth know that Enosh would mock the Lord and set up a future purpose toward
No.
Jesus?
No, he didn't know that. I think this is, no, I wouldn't say that. I think this is no different than Samuel's sons. It's no different than you find in other scriptures where David had Solomon that started off good, then went bad. I think you just have these sinners of mankind. That's what happens, right? So I don't think it's anything to do with him knowing that. I think it's more a dictation of God saying to you that we don't know. We don't know. Just the opposite. We don't know, and our best of our good intentions is unfortunately different from when God's involved. So then you have, by the way, interesting enough, I think what's real interesting to me is Methuselah. Methuselah, by the way, which I find particularly interesting. He already talked about him as the longest guy lived in the Bible. But he was 369 years old when Noah was born. Right? So here's the problem, though. If you look about when he died right before the flood. He died right before the flood. You just do the math. You're like, oh, interesting. So that means Noah's grandfather was not alive during the flood. You look at Lamech. Lamech, his father, Noah's father, died 5 years before the flood. Lamech, Noah's dad, he had died 5 years prior to the flood. So you may be asking, what's the point? My point is this: Noah had no patriarch alive when he was on the flood. He was on the ark during the flood. He had no father, grandfather, or before him. They were all dead prior to the flood. That's my point of doing all this. Seeing the interesting numbers is cool, and seeing who was alive and who's not. But remembering that uniqueness of Noah, he was all alone when it comes to his patriarch of his family pedigree. It was just him and his wife and his kids and their wives. That's all he had. There was no father or grandfather to lean on. So if you feel you're alone and you feel like you're an orphan, you feel like your parents are gone, Noah had nobody to lean on when it comes to somebody who was his mentor. They were gone. I find that to be interesting beyond belief. People kind of miss over that. Yes?
Vicky said it's strange that the meaning of his name was what he did.
Yeah. Yep. And so I think the interesting part here I just wanted to point out is that all the important people of the genealogy of chapter 5, they were all dead. They were all dead. It was only the sons of those, they were all dead. Other sons and daughters that were not listed, obviously, were alive. Obviously, the world was populated. But the main characters you see, they're all gone. His dad and granddad were dead. Enos, the guy who starts off all the mocking, he died 153 years after Enoch was taken up. Seth died 14 years prior to Noah even being born. So there's a lot of interesting things there. I think the biggest takeaway so far is that God isolated Noah from his patriarch pedigree of his family, of his mentors, and it really helps me to get some comfort because sometimes I mean, just being honest with myself, you envy folks who have a strong relationship with their mothers and fathers, who have a strong relationship with their grandmothers and grandfathers. If you don't have that, and it's other folks that do, and there's a godly relationship, it makes you say, wow, you kind of, I don't know about anybody else, but I can speak from experience. I don't have that, and my wife does have that. So I always have a great contrast of God's will in my life to always understand the difference. And so it always makes me realize that what I don't have. And then you read about Noah and you're like, oh, whether he had it or not, guess what? When he needed them most, they weren't even there. You say, needed them most, what do you mean? As in, hello, God's talking to you, man. God just called you. And you can't go check on, but it's the greatest news ever. Imagine the greatest news ever. You got accepted to a certain college. You got you won your award. You got your ceremony. You accomplished your goal. This is the biggest goal of all time. God's talking to you, man. And you can't share that with your dad. You can't share it with your granddad. They're gone. Imagine what that must have been like for him. He's all alone. He can't share with nobody. That he shared with his wife and his kids. But the scripture made it clear that God says to Noah that it's because of him, that because he was righteous, is that he says this to Noah. And so if you go back in Genesis 6:18, he says, but with you I will establish my covenant, and you shall come into the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. That's in Genesis 6:18. He makes it clear. The pillar is Noah. It's Noah. And by the way, you may go, oh, come on, you're picking on the nomenclature of the words. It's just that, I mean, his wife and kids were just as righteous as him. Okay. Explain to me this then. Go to Ezekiel 14:14. Ezekiel 14:14 reads a little snippet about Noah. Son of man, this is verse 13, going into verse 14. He says, Son of man, when the land sins against me, by trespassing grievously, then I will stretch out my hand upon it, and I will break the staff of the bread thereof, and send famine upon it, and I will cut off man and beast from it. Though these three men, Noah, Daniel, Job, were in it, they should deliver but their own souls by their righteousness, says the Lord. What? He just got finished saying he's about to lay waste to the entire earth, but if these three men are in it, what? Their righteousness would have delivered? Are you serious right now? So he's giving you a Smithsonian, if you will, of iconic people that God regards as righteous people. Noah, Daniel, Job. By the way, two of which aren't even Jewish. Job, not a Jew. Noah, not a Jew. So much for, all the people God could have chosen of the Jewish line. Notice how he purposely only had 1/3 of the people listed, Daniel, 1 of 3, as being Jewish. The other two people, not Jewish. Interesting, right? So for people to say, well, Genesis 6:18, you're reading off the page there. You're making it sound like it's just him and God meant his whole family. Why didn't God say that? Then or later in Ezekiel? Why didn't he say Noah and his family? Why did he say just Noah was righteous in Ezekiel 14:14? Just like here when he says in Genesis 6:18, with you, and you come into the ark, and you. I mean, that's it 3 times. I mean, how do you not understand? Right? So, interesting thing again, so the whole point about this is, again, Noah had no patriarch alive prior to the flood.
Well, now,
Which
years
which-
since it was first called, Methuselah would have been alive
Which means, which is interesting to me. So that means that they actually, to your point, so they actually were alive during the years, and so he had to. That's hurtful. So they didn't. Well, they weren't part of it. So that sucks. I mean, because either you have to agree that they were hearing it from him, and they rejected him, which is probably more likely the case, but he couldn't share it with them because they weren't in the same. If they were in agreement with him, they'd be on the ark. So you couldn't. He couldn't.
Before that, and Methuselah's name was his name.
Well, yeah, Lamech was dead 5 years prior too, but Methuselah he died right before the flood happened. But it's just kind of like, gosh, man, it's like, oh my goodness gracious. It's just, how could you? If you're Noah, how does that feel? You know, to be sharing this news with you can't really share. I say share, I didn't mean, he could share it, but he couldn't share in the same joy in a sense, because they weren't in agreement with him. If they were, they'd be on the ark. They weren't.
I always took it that, Methuselah was born to die before the flood, not a bad reflection on him. It's just his death his death was the sign that the flood was imminent.
No, but it's just, but it's, granted that's true, but the whole thing is that, I just think of from the personal relationship standpoint, Noah had no support from his grandfather or father. Because if he did, they'd be on the ark.
Well, of course they
Lamech died
died
beforehand. Lamech died beforehand.
And Methuselah, right? I never had the impression that Methuselah was bad or rejected the message. It's just that his death would bring.
Well, the reason I'm saying to them, the reason I'm saying they're not righteous like him is because God called Noah out for 100 years to build this ark. They were alive, and he was building that ark. Why didn't he mention your dad and granddad? He said, of all people on the earth, I chose you. Not your dad, not your granddad, who were alive. So what's that supposed to mean? You see what I mean? He didn't even mention his dad or granddad being righteous, which is interesting to me, because if they were, he would have mentioned it. So it wasn't just that they died before the flood. It's that God didn't even mention them as being righteous. That's the interesting thing about that. He didn't mention them. And why would he not mention them? It's almost as if he knew that Noah's heart would be broken, not be able to share. And this great news, he couldn't find fellowship with his grandfather and father. Yes. Babe?
What?
Yes. Yeah, I thought you had a question. Sorry. My apology. So going back to.
And I think Abraham wouldn't have been able to share, I guess, with Terah either. Terah didn't get to come with him, but it wasn't mentioned as righteous.
No, exactly. I know. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. So there's these, exactly right. So you had from the first two divisions of family. Well, first you had Noah. First you had Adam, Ha-Adam, and Abel. Abel died at a young age. That's why his main name means vapor. So you can see how Ha-Adam never got a chance to share in that. But when Ha-Adam had Seth and Seth had Enos, you're like, oh great, Enos he went south. So he had one good kid, one excellent kid in Abel, another great kid in Seth. Then he had and everything went south after the third kid. Cain was also, he was never really a good kid. He was always off. So it wasn't really his biological, but. So you had Abel and Cain, but Abel being his biological, and then you have Seth, then you have Enos. So that wouldn't be his grandson, because it's actually it was his grandson. Enos was his grandson. So his grandson, from that point forward, he had no grandson he could look to. There was a grandson, Enos. It wasn't until Enoch, which was his great. That was the only one that was, that's a long time to wait from your firstborn, no, your secondborn, I should say, to then have somebody else who's righteous. But it just kind of, the family unit was fractured from the very beginning. From Ha-Adam not having a pedigree of that. So I guess for me, it just kind of speaks to people who, I guess I can't appreciate it, nor do I know, am I over embellishing it? I don't know. But to me, it's a big deal if in fact you had a family that was a pedigree of loving and serving the Lord. And when you can say you go back 3 generations of your grandfather and father and you, that's pretty powerful. Because you don't see that many times. The beginning of the Bible, you don't see it with Ha-Adam. You don't see it with Noah. And you don't see it later on with Abram. The 3 iconic people in the beginning of the Scripture. The 3 iconic people. It's the man in the garden, the man on the boat, and the man who God makes a new people out of. All 3 didn't have a pedigree of a father and grandfather on the same team of loving and worshiping and honoring God. What? From 3 generations in. You just have, at best, you had 2 generations, them and their son. That's it. You didn't have 3. You didn't have 3. I mean, what's up? It's just sad, you know? So those guys didn't have that. It's just really, you know, it's just broken. The family unit was
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that's the first time that you have
the 3.
the 3.
And that's probably, and that's why I believe he mentions that. So it just dawned on me after doing this study, that's why God mentions that so much. Because if they were any kind of insightful people, they'd go, wait a second. That's the first grandfather, father, and grandson that are all serving the Lord in godly righteousness. That's never happened till now. Duh. So and you don't think about that though, do you? But it doesn't, you don't think, but that's why he does. So it's like he's saying, this is the first pedigree of patriarch tradition. This is the first patriarchs I'm going to bless to have 3 generations deep of honoring and loving me. Wow. And no wonder he made it. But how did that happen? Was that made possible because Abraham himself was righteous? Nope. It says that God himself separated him. God himself taught him Hebraic language. God himself made him a new people. So God's the one who intervened. So in other words, if it was up to the sin nature, you got no shot of having 3 generations of godly heritage in your family. You have no shot. So folks who go, oh, I can do it my own. All I got to do is follow the 10 Commandments. All I got to do is do the moral code of do right to other people and do right unto others if they want to me, the golden rule. No. God has to intervene for you to have a godly pedigree in your family. So if nothing else comes out of this first off and foremost is that God's making that point very clear as far as I'm concerned and saying, look, Noah's Ark's a lot more involved, yes, but the one premise out of the gate is you want a pedigree of a godly family, you have to relent and submit to God Almighty. He has to be the one who defines you. It can't be what you do. It has to be who he is in your life. It can't be what you think. It can't be what you do or it has to be who he is in your life and how he has defined you, how your value is based on him and your essence and who you are as a being is based on him. Only then can he define the pedigree of your family being 3 deep and beyond. So anyway, I digress. So then also we have, it says that he's supposed to have, again, Noah is, and Noah's given this, he's our counsel, he was our consoler. It says, so in Genesis 5:29, but also in chapter 8, verse 20 and 22. I want to read that right now. So if you go to chapter 8, verse 20 and 22, and he says, in 20:22, what's he say? Noah built an ark, or altar, excuse me, an ark. Noah built an altar unto the Lord and took every clean beast, every clean fowl of the burnt offering on the sacrifice altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I shall not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake. Go back to Genesis chapter 5, verse 29, when he said, Noah was our comfort, our consolation concerning our work and our hard labor of our hand, because the ground which the Lord had cursed. In other words, he was the promised one to end this consequence of the curse of the ground. He was supposed to bring a different movement, a next phase of life, a new restoration, renewal from God concerning this curse on the ground. So what does he do? God says to him, I will not again, verse 21 of chapter 8 of Genesis, not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, and neither again smite any more every living thing as I have done, while all the days of the earth remain, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer, winter, day and night shall not cease. But that's because he brought that through the post-flood issue comment of Noah being on the flood. And Lamech, his dad, said he was the consolation for the work and toil because of the ground which the Lord had cursed. So he was the consolation because of the consequence of what God cursed the ground from. So he was supposed to put an end to that. And he did. So in other words, this curse that God put on the earth, it came to fruition with the flood. That's the point. And it's now that Noah has fulfilled being that one who would then be the one who would then be the end of that era that we call dispensation. He was the end of that as a new dispensation begins now. He said, no longer will I do this, the Lord says. That's clearly an end of a dispensation. When the Lord says this, that means what he used to do is no longer that. It's a dispensation change. So Noah was the earmark between an old and new dispensation. And that's, you may say he was the prophesied one to come or whatever. But the point is, he was the end of a dispensation under a curse, and now he's under new dispensation where God makes a promise. That's pretty awesome. Yes?
I'm looking at Lamech. Aside from the murder of Abel and the rapture of Enoch, he is the first one to die before his father. I believe.
Oh, wow, interesting. I didn't look at the genealogy, but I don't know that for a fact, but that sounds
Yeah,
interesting.
I think he's the first one I can remember.
I have it all written down in another paper at home. I did all these mathematics out. I had to make sure I did it right this time. But I think that's true, though, what you're saying. That's because Methuselah lived so doggone long.
Oh, yeah.
That's why. But yes, he's the first one to outlive his father. But he lived 700. He had that iconic number of years, though, 777. Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, so God's complete number by divine nature. And by the way, interesting, God's complete number, Noah, Lamech dies, 777. 5 years later, God's number for grace, boom, flood happens. Interesting, huh? God's complete number cubed times 3, right? God's complete number 3 times his divine number, noted by his number for grace, and then there's the flood. And in other words, he was completed now. He had completed his patriarch. His days were over, but actually Methuselah was still alive. It's interesting. So his days would come to completion, and the grace would be on his son, but not on him, which is, I put a C in. There's supposed to be a C there. I just can't, I couldn't imagine being the dad and seeing that your son is experiencing a blessing that you can't partake in. That's I don't know how that feels. That's just got to be gut-wrenching. But then again, it wasn't mentioned as righteous, which again I just find very hard to understand. Understand why Methuselah and Lamech weren't mentioned at all as being righteous people. It's just Noah. So again, now going into more of the things that happened during the ark as well. So Noah also, as we see, was this righteous one. But then you have the issue of why the flood to begin with. So if you look in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, and it says that, just read the first 2 verses. And it came to pass when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they were fair, and they took them, which is by force, which means they raped. They took them, again, women of all they chose, of what they preferred. And so they actually had hybrid offspring. You'll say, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Where do you get angels from sons of God? We're called sons of God. We're not angels. That's the comments you get from people. And just to make sure we're clear on this, the sons of God phrase is used in the Old Testament to never refer to humans. It always refers to angelic hosts. Always. Now, sons of God in the New Testament refers to us. Well, why is that? Because the angelic host of old occupied the places of inheritance, the places in the heavenlies. In the New Testament, post-resurrection, the inheritance and the positions in the heavenlies, remember, we shall judge the angels, those who are heirs, they have supplanted their position, and they are the ones who are in, not yet, but we have opportunity to be in positions of being where the angels rule and reign with God. And so that's why the sons of God were mentioned as angelic hosts in the Old Testament, and man got no shot of that. There's no inheritance in view unless you have a salvation through Christ and in Christ. And that's why post-resurrection of Christ, now sons of God is a title used of men in Christ who are in a position to inherit the heavens. That's what that's about. Now, it all deals with positions in the heavenlies, and that's what sons of God is about, and that's why men had no shot at being called that in the Old Testament, but they do in the New. So some people might say, well, in the New it says men, and therefore in the Old it's men. Well, that's just dumb. That's just plumb dumb. That's like saying the angel of the Lord, in the New Testament, the angel is an angel. In the Old Testament, it's the same thing then. It's not Jesus when it says angel of the Lord. Well, then now you're just being dumb. Because the angel of the Lord, it's clearly, we did a scripture on that, and it's a whole study on that, and it's clearly speaking of Christ, Yeshua. The angel of the Lord is clearly a title given to Christ as the messenger of the Lord. So if you want to actually sit here and say, oh, well, the word angel is always mentioning in the New Testament as being, no, dude, you can't. It's just so interesting. People do that, but it's not true. So, but forget what I just said. Let's just get with the text itself and look how I can show in the text itself the problem you would have interpreting sons of God as being men. And why there was a flood, for two reasons God gives you. One of them is this reason right here about this hybrid offspring. So, and then he goes into verse 3 and 4, and he said, the Lord said, my spirit shall always strive with man for an erring, that he would be, that he also be, reading right, also be also his flesh, He says, yet his days shall be 120. And that's not speaking, because some people say 120 years between when Noah started building the ark and when he finished. Nope, because in verse 32 of chapter 5, he was 500 years old when God called him, 500. And then you go over to chapter 7 in verse 6, and Noah was a son of 600 years old when the floodwater was upon the earth. So 5 minus 6 is 100, right? So where do you get 120 from, right? 20 years is after Noah got off the ark. Then he got drunk, and you know what Ham and Canaan did unto him, as he says. And so he has this cursing of Ham and Canaan. And so therefore the lineage of Ham's line was cursed. And the 20 speaks to how God would not strive with man anymore, given the fact that there was a reset button. And here we got 20 years later, incest. 20 years later, unrighteousness. It's just sinful, deplorable behavior. And that's what he said, that's it, I'm out. And that's when Noah lost his pedigree, if you will, as being a righteous man at that point. But God, ironically enough, in Ezekiel, still counts him as righteous, which I thought was awesome. So, but at that moment, he was, at that moment, the Spirit didn't strive with man. I wouldn't say it's not so much him as it was his ignorance of not doing what he should have been doing. And his sons were the one who actually acted out. They're the one, Ham's the one who actually did the evil. So it's not him himself who did the evil, it's his son. But then you have the consequence laid on the whole family and all of us as humanity.
Just think, 20 is resh for wicked. 20 years Ham did that. On the wicked year he did that.
See, 20, see, it's evil. And then what he did, people think it's sodomy, but it wasn't. His father's nakedness is his mother. So that's what he did. He slept with his mom. It's crazy. Ugh. It's just not crazy. It's crazy. That's why Noah said he woke up and saw what he did unto him. And that's why Japheth and Shem walked backwards and covered up they don't look at your mom like that. So in any event, that's getting ahead of ourselves. But in verse 4 of chapter 6, he said there were giants, or Nephilim, in the earth in those days. You look at the word Nephilim in the Bible, and you will find that it's only mentioned 3 times. It's mentioned here in Genesis 6:4, and also in Numbers 13:33. So let's go to Numbers 13:33. For those who say these sons of God are human, okay, fine. Let's just fine. I don't care. Whatever you want to say. Let's just read it out. Let's just study it out. Genesis 13:33. And there we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come of the giants, Nephilim, is twice, Nephilim. We saw the Nephilim giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, Nephilim. And we were in our own sights as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Okay? That's what he says. And Deuteronomy 10:11 and 12, he says, the Enums dwelt therein in times past, people great and many and tall, and the Anakims, which also were accounted giants as the Anakims, but the Moabites called them Emims. Remember, the Anakims come into play because it says sons of Anak back in Numbers 13:33. So if Anakims come from Anak, who are tall and great, he means giants literally. Because some folks want to go, no. He means giant as in stature. Just, stature, man. Oh, come on, dude. It says clearly they're tall, okay? You got to, come on. Yes.
Tracy said 13. I have no 33 in Genesis 13.
What? What was that? Numbers 13:33. Yes.
You said Genesis, not Numbers.
Oh, my bad. That's I'm ignorant. Numbers 13:33 is the mentioning of the Nephilim. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, the Nephilim are mentioned there and again in Numbers 13:33, which are then referenced again in Deuteronomy 2:10 and 11. I apologize for my ignorance.
Deuteronomy 2 or Deuteronomy 10?
Deuteronomy 2, verses 10 and 11. My apologies.
Oh, okay.
If I'm saying that wrong, I keep on saying things wrong today. What's wrong with me?
Deuteronomy 2:10.
get my head examined. Yeah, Deuteronomy 2, verses 10 and 11. And Numbers 13, verse 33. Sorry. So, okay, so he says, so there were giants on the earth in those days. And we already established the word giant is Nephilim. Doesn't matter what I think it means. It's irrelevant to what I think. That's what the word says in the original Semitic Hebrew language. I don't care what you say. That's what the word is. That word appears only 2 times in the scripture, or 3 times in 2 different places. Here in Genesis 6:4 and Numbers 13:33. In Numbers 13:33, he mentions they're connected to the Anakims, which are tall giants as well, which they're mentioned in other places in Scripture, clearly speaking of giants. But it says here in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, for those who want to say, those giants are men of stature. No, they're tall. They're really tall, they're, as in giants. This is and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, they became mighty men, which were of old men of renown. And this is what he's talking about in regarding the hybrid offspring, which is another reason why the flood had to happen. You can't have this bastardization of angelic and human be on the earth. Not going to happen. God doesn't like that at all. So that's a bastardization. So when you look over into, again, verses 6 and 7, continuing on, reading Genesis 6. So reading on verse 5, 6, and 7, excuse me. And then God saw the wickedness of humanity was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Now, people might say, well, that's not really accurate. We're not always continually evil. That's just the scripture out of context. Well, look over, that was before the flood. We've been better since then. Oh, okay. Look at Ecclesiastes, chapter 8, verse 11, when Solomon writes this. Solomon writes in Ecclesiastes, verse 8:11, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Okay, Then you go to chapter 9, verse 3. This is an evil among all things that are done under the sun, that there is one event unto us all. Yea, also, the heart of the sons of man is full of evil, and madness and folly is in their heart while they live, and after it they go unto the dead. So you want to sit here and tell me it's only a post-flood issue, or a pre-flood issue, excuse me. It's pre and post-flood. We got issues, okay? Jesus said out of the heart, comes evil and murderers and all that stuff. So, I mean, it's pretty clear. We're just not good people, okay? From our hearts, we're just continuously evil. So verse 6 of chapter 6 of Genesis, going back Genesis, and it repented the Lord. That means he sighed. It's a matter of like a disgust. So the Lord, let me explain that. So the Lord sighed. So the Lord, so this was let me say here, sorry, he was so I'm just pointing out that. So, and God says that he actually sighed. So what this means in Genesis 6, 6, and 7, it means, I'll write down the Hebrew word here. So it says God, and it's the word Nacham, Nacham. It means he was sorry, disgusted, and he was consoling, like he's console himself. So what he's doing is just simply going, he's just basically, if you were to see him in real life, he'd be like, oh my gosh, like that, like you do, like I do, right? When something goes totally opposite of the way it should go. When you see someone, for example, acting like a fool when they should be in a place of honor and respect, you go, Oh my goodness. Really? Right? So God's just doing that. So God's just saying, oh, oh my gosh. I created you to serve me, to love me, to know me. What are you doing? Now people say, well, why would he say that if he's ordained everything? Because he's showing his human emotion. He's showing his emotions to humanity, which one day he would take on human flesh. He's showing his emotion to us that just because he ordains everything doesn't mean he doesn't care. Of course he cares. He loves. He loves. He is love. He can't help himself. He wants to always collaborate and be a part of his creation. He never intended to go, since I ordained it all, I'm detached. That was never his intention, ever. Ever, never, ever, never, ever. His intention was to create everything and ordain it all to go good and bad and whatnot. Yes, but he wants to be engaged in that process. And so when things go the opposite way of what, even though he's ordained it, he's ordained for his reaction to show us that we don't know the ordained will of God. So in times, all we know what we're doing. And so in time, he wants us to know what we're doing does create a grievance and a sense of, oh, adios míos. We say, oh my God. That's the Latino way of saying, oh my God. They say, adios míos. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. So it's just, God's just disgusted and he's sorrowful about the creation of mankind. But the interesting part is it's not just mankind he talks about here in Genesis chapter 6. He says he was grieved in himself. He was sorrowful that he made man. Whoop, let me put this on the board. And the word made means out of something, right? That he made man. That's what it says. He consoled himself that he made man on the earth. Right? So in Genesis 6, chapter 6, and it repented God, or again, he was sorrowful, disgusted, consoling himself that he made man on the earth. And it grieved him at his heart. And now it says it grieved him. And the word grieved is atzab. And atzab means it was a painful displeasure. Which sounds odd because people say, how could God act this way about things he's already ordained? Because again, he outside of time has no problem ordaining things that he lives inside time to collaborate with his creation. So in time with his creation, he wants his creation to always see his actions in time and relevance to what he's ordained throughout time. Because if he didn't do that, he wouldn't have a love and care to convince us that he wants to and is engaged. He wants to be and is engaged constantly with his creation. And he shows that through his emotional collaboration of he can't help himself but to be always involved in the timeline. He always is. Always is. He never sits back and forgets it and says, let's see how it goes. Because I've already ordained everything to happen, so let's just sit and watch. No. He's emotionally engaged, which really speaks to people that say, you know what, it is what it is. I'm not going to be emotionally engaged in this. So being emotionally disengaged from something, from someone who matters to you, is wrong. Because if that was true, then God would do that. You should be emotionally engaged with people that matter to you. You should be emotionally invested with people that matter to you. If you say to me, oh my gosh, you're twisting things. No, I'm not. God created everything. He was emotionally engaged. Evidence, Genesis 6, verse 6 and 7. You cannot disengage emotionally from things and people that matter to you, mostly people that matter to you. You have to be engaged. If they matter to you, you have to be emotionally engaged, emotionally invested. If you're not, you're trying to shield yourself, that's not cool. You got to be emotionally invested, emotionally engaged to show you care and love and the way your Father made you as he cares for you the same way.
But one thing I've been reading recently, a lot of women just emotionally disengage. I mean, Rose Kennedy did. My own mother did. What he did was nothing. What she did was nothing. I mean,
I know people emotionally disengage. They do it all the time because they feel like, oh, you hurt me so much, or because of whatever. But you still have an emotional investment into somebody that you love and care about. It's that simple. But I know people do it. It's not. So here's the interesting thing now. But now it gets more interesting about verse 7. So in verse 7, God says, It grieved him at his heart, it says, by the way. It says at his heart.
Now, one thing, this 120 years, this is separate from Noah. This is before the genealogy of Noah. So what does this 120 years mean at this point, this shortened lifespan?
It's talking about 120 years of the 100 years between 500 and 600 years of him building the ark. My spirit won't strive with man 120 years, any longer than that. He's going to strive with Noah through his family 100 years, off the ark another 20 years, and then no longer. That's it. So Noah was the last one where God was with him every day. And that's why after that, what did Abraham have said to him? God would appear to him. God would talk to prophets. Noah was the last man who God every day was with. That's what he's talking about. That's a good point. Noah was the last man. I'll put that on the board here so you know that.
Of course, he lived after that 20 years that Ham did that to him.
Noah was the last man that had daily blessings.
But it didn't last till his death because
No.
there were a lot of years between when Ham did that to him and his death. So I guess
Correct. So Noah, so that's why, so Noah, for example, to your point, so Noah was 620 from 500 years old.
So he had 330 years to
To
go.
600.
Of the Lord not talking with him.
Well, not every day, you would say. Because his striving with man speaks to him walking with you daily. So he would still appear to Abraham and later on talk to prophets. So he still does that. But striving means it has that daily process. He was daily engaged with Noah. Imagine how Noah must have felt, to your point. 620 years later, 20 years of age, excuse me, he has a good 330 years to go before he dies. He's got 330 years where God still talks to him, but not every day. It's like it's like being in Iraq or going on a military furlough or something, or going on a trip. You still know that someone's back home waiting for you, but it's not the same thing, man. If you're not with them, it's just not the same thing. So Noah had that sense of the relationship with God was strained. It was there, but he wasn't striving with him in the same, it wasn't a daily walk. That sucks.
What broke it was incest. Shows you how bad incest
Yeah.
is.
But the Spirit, that's why God strives with us now every day. Every day, God with us every day. In Christ, when you're in Christ, you have the opportunity every day to have God strive with you every day, just by having the fruit of having the Holy Spirit in you, educate you to have the fruit of the Spirit of Christ come out of you. So every day we have ability to be striving with God every day, because of the death and resurrection of Christ and the Holy Spirit testifying and then giving us the Spirit of Christ out of us. But back in their day, that's why David would say, "Take not your Holy Spirit from me," because he would come and go. Since that's what happened. Since Noah was 620 years old, after this, to your point, after that, God's Spirit came and went. No longer.
33 times 10. And of course, the age of Christ, age 33 at the crucifixion.
Yeah, so that's what it's talking about. And so it's a good point you're making. So, I mean, I couldn't imagine what it's like to be Noah. I mean, he had more years not walking with God than he had walking with God. He had 500 years of nothing. And then 500 years into how old he was, then God calls him. So he had 500 years of not even knowing. As far as we know, there was no knowledge of him walking with God, which, by the way, is interesting to note. I mean, was he? I don't know if he was righteous or not in God's eyes, but I would think he was, because God called him righteous, right? Or did God make him righteous when he called him? The point is that we have nothing about, until 500 years of age, God calls him. Then for 100 years, God gives them instruction to build the ark. And then age 600, he gets on the ark. God makes the flood happen. And then 20 years after that, it's over. Their daily commune is over. It's like, whoa, that was a blessed 120 years. Can I get that again? He's like, no, I'm done. I told you, remember? 120 years, my spirit would strive with man, and that's it. He's like, oh, I got to live the last 330 years of my life without you every day? Can you just be there for me? He's, well, I can imagine him saying, on occasions, I'll come and go. I'm not going to leave you empty. I'm just not going to be there every day. It's like, oh my gosh. I couldn't imagine what that was like. I wonder, how often did he talk to him? Was it once a week? Was it once every other day? Was it once a month? Who knows?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Noah punished for Ham
That was his sin.
So that's why he was punished for drunkenness, and the descendants were
Well,
punished for incense.
and it wasn't so much for drunkenness because he didn't know, he wasn't considering, I defend him by saying, I don't think he considered, he wasn't getting drunk willfully. He got drunk ignorantly because he didn't understand that the fermentation of the sun's rays now coming in were causing that to the grapes on the skin, because before there was that whole different environment of the world.
So
But-
why did he,
but-
it's
but the
a
point-
shame he got punished. He
Well,
deserved
his
it.
punishment, I would think, is this: you can't be called by. This is what you can't get around this. You can't be called by God at 500 years of age and be told to build an ark for 100 years. So for 100 years, I don't care how old you are, for 100 years you're doing something God told you to do. Then as soon as you get off the ark, you go to plant in a vineyard. Why would you do that? You should be building houses. You should be building abodes to live in. So my point is simply God made him into a builder of things, and he went to be a planter in a vineyard. Not cool. That wasn't what he was supposed to do. That's my take on that. God trained him and educated him and told him to be a builder. Why would God 100 years after that go, oh, by the way, now forget what I taught you. Now it's time to be a farmer. What? Why would he do that? You have sons who can do that. But he should be the builder, his sons be the farmer. And so that to me was the biggest problem. If he was continuing to do what God wanted him to do, he wouldn't have been engaged in that.
And
That's-
Naboth got killed, but it was Naboth's vineyard. So was Naboth really doing something bad having a vineyard?
Well, who we see Naboth?
David and Naboth,
Oh, it's okay.
they have killed, killed Naboth.
You're talking way ahead. Okay, you got me confused. I thought,
I'm way ahead.
You're way ahead. I was going to say, what?
Naboth was such a good guy, but he had the vineyard, and he knew about the fermentation. So why did Naboth, a good guy, have a vineyard? He got killed over it.
Well, the vineyard. The wine is seen as a good thing in the scripture, though, too. But at this point, he didn't know what wine was. Noah didn't know what wine was.
Yeah, but Naboth did.
Yeah, he did. But wine was actually seen as a good thing in the celebration of festivals and festivities and marriages. God did mention that in the scripture. So it is valid to do that for festivals of God's word, to celebrate, to bring joy and mirth, but not to get drunk. That was never sanctioned by God. God makes it very clear. Getting drunk, losing your control of yourself was never sanctioned by him. To have a drink of wine for mirth and gladness and joy, to celebrate, is okay. And that's okay. It's in the Bible. But people like me, they hail the cloth. People like me who are in Bible teaching position, we can't do that. We're not allowed. The Bible makes that clear. I'm not allowed to. Even though it's allowed, it's not allowed for those who teach. It's not allowed because it can be it can be seen as a different thing. I can't partake of it at all. So, but God does allow it for mirth, joy, celebration, but never to get drunk. And the excess is always nothing he ever accepts. It's always condemned. He can't, because you lose self-control. It's within the moderation. You cannot take that to a place where so that's the thing with Naboth. It's good to have a vineyard to supply the wine for celebrations, for joyous occasion God ordains, and to have mirth for God ordains, but it has to be in moderation. So it's a slippery slope. You're providing something that could easily be exploited, that can easily be excessively used to its wrong, and that's the problem. Yes?
Laney said, how did Noah know to use grapeseed to plant a vineyard? Just curious, did he take it on the ark?
Yeah, that's, yes, there was food. You're ahead of me, but I'll tell you right now, in Genesis chapter 6 and verse 21, they were all vegetarian. People say the animals eat each other on the ark? Nope. Chapter 6, Genesis, verse 21. And take thou unto thee all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee. And it shall be food for you and for them, which means they did not eat each other. Okay, there was no animals eating animals. So God said, bring food on the ark, which means not animals. That means he brought grain and fruits and veggies on the ark. It's that simple. You can't, that's Genesis 6, verse 21, they're all vegan, they're all vegetarians. Humans and animals ate nothing but fruits, veggies, and grain. That's it. You can't bring no flesh on the ark and be cooking out. Charcoal grill on a wood ark, not smart. Yes?
And she said he had to know how to press the grapes and know fermentation. He didn't know fermentation.
He didn't know fermentation. So I mean, as far as him planting a vineyard, like you're saying, how did he know to do that? I mean, you would still plant. I don't know how you would know that. To your point, I don't know how to.
She said they would have been flesh of an animal.
Right, they can't do that, not yet.
But of course, the animals were still killed, sacrificed, but I guess no part of the animal must have been eaten before the flood.
None.
Yeah,
None.
just the whole thing sacrificed.
Yeah, so the only time you would eat, the animal sacrifice was given, of course, when coats of skin were given to Adam and Eve. Now we know later on in Moses' day they were to eat the lamb when they did that, to sacrifice. But there was no mention of them eating an animal. And by him saying this to Noah, at this point, the inference is that men were not meat eaters until after. But I would say the righteous people were not meat eaters. I would say that because there was men, remember the other Lamech, not Noah's dad, but the other Lamech, Cain's line, killed as well. So Cain murdered, and so did his lineage. So you have, I think, those people, since they killed the human flesh, they could have also had no problem killing animals as well and eating them. Because I don't think that was out of the line of understanding. So the unrighteous people, the ungodly, the evil, were probably killing each other, as we know. Because here's why I say that. Because the scripture says there was violence, the earth was filled with violence. So if the earth is filled with violence in verse 11 of Genesis 6, it says the earth was filled with violence. That would include the killing of each other and animals. So I think the evil people were killing the animals and each other. But the righteous, in this case only Noah, was told no. So which would make me think, 500 years of life, living in an environment people were killing animals, he probably tasted meat before. I would think. So, which is another interesting thing about how much discipline he had to be on an ark.
And all the Diluvians that perished, you wonder how many of those transgressed maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, because
they were all violent.
They're all violent. So when you're violent, it means you're killing. I mean, it's what the word speaks to. It means to kill. So going back to verse 7, though, I want to see it in chapter 6, verse 7. He says, "And the Lord said, I will destroy," which means to wipe out humanity, "from whom I created." Now, here's the interesting part. The Lord, he says this interesting. So in Genesis, he talks about destroying. So Yahweh, so the Lord Yahweh, he actually destroys. He says, "I'm going to destroy." And this is the word he uses is makah, which means to wipe out or obliterate, right? That's what the Lord says. He said, "I'm going to destroy, obliterate," but he says it in Genesis 6, 7. In Genesis 6, 7, and also 7, 4, and verse 23. It's always the Lord who says this. But then he says, then God comes in, God Elohim, says, I'm going to destroy. But this word is different, which is the word shakah, so it's S-H-A-C-H-A-T-H. I'm going to destroy, which means to corrupt, to ruin. And he says here, he says because of the violence. He says here. This is let me get the verses here. So Genesis 6, 11 through 13 is there. So I want you to see this word picture here, what God is saying. So in verse 7 of Genesis 6, he says, "I will destroy man and wipe him out, whom I created," by the way. Oh, okay then. So he says, of whom I created. And the word created is not asa, not asa, but bara, which is the angelic host, by the way. You go, what? But yeah, remember? the hybrid offspring on the land. He's not playing. He wants that eliminated. But then he says, from the face of the earth. Now watch this. That's why he says, I will destroy man, verse 7 of Genesis 6. The Lord said, I'll wipe him out, whom I created, from the face of the soil. And he says, then he goes and he says, man and beast and creeping things, and the flowers of the air. For it repented. Or again, for it disgusted me that I made them. Right? So he's talking about both things he created and made. So in verse 7, so here in verse 7, he's talking about things he created and made. Because he mentions created here, and he says, and made. So here you have now, and to other, I just mentioned also in verse 7, verse 4, and verse 23, you read this. So again, he says, the Lord talking in Genesis chapter 7, verse 1. That's how you know it's the Lord. But in verse 4 of chapter 7, the Lord talking unto Noah, he said, for yet again 7 days, and I shall cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made, I will destroy from off the earth. So now he says, so here it's created and made in this one here. But here it's just made. Look in verse 23 of chapter 7 of Genesis. And every living substance was destroyed, wiped out. There it is again, which was upon the face of the ground. Both man and cattle and creeping things and the flowers of the air. And they were destroyed or wiped out from the earth. And Noah alone remained alive, and they that were with him on the ark. So again, all you have is the one reference. These two are about the made, everything he made. But this, right there, he created the things he created. Then back to chapter 6 and verse 7, I'll destroy whom I created, destroy the man I created. Now, to look even more so, and back to Genesis chapter 6, verse 8, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, which is like, wow. I mean, how did that even happen? And so in these other generations of Noah, he was a just man. He was righteous. It says he was perfect in his generations, which means, again, he was without blemish. He walked, we don't know for how long. He says 500 years old when God called him, but I wonder how long this description was of him. Was it the whole 500 years of his life? I wonder. Because it says here he was a man with unblemished. He was in past acts, he walked with God, Elohim. He had 3 sons. But in verse 11, the earth also was corrupted before the face of Elohim. And the earth was filled with violence, from violence. And God looked upon, and Elohim looked upon the earth, and beheld it was corrupted, and for all flesh had corrupted his own way upon the earth. So you see this word corrupted comes up again. So in verse 11 to 13, and God said unto Noah, Elohim said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come. By the way, remember, you say all flesh, you see, there's no angels involved in that. Is there now? Okay. We'll show you that from Jude. There is flesh involved. Angels have flesh. It says it in Jude. Yes?
Eleni said that stamps out free will again.
Oh, yeah. But if you go over to Jude, you go to the book of Jude, and you can also see that angels had flesh in regard to people who think, oh my goodness, it shows here all flesh, therefore it's not talking about angels. And it says that and those angels in verse 6 of Jude, who kept not their first principality, their first estate, but left their own habitation, he has kept in perpetual chains under thick darkness for the day of judgment, of the great day. That's the word just as. Sodom and Gomorrah, you look at as Sodom and Gomorrah and the about them cities in like manner, having committed again fornication and having gone away after sarcos of heterox, of another. So the Sodom and Gomorrah people went after bestiality, and he's saying the angels did the same thing as Sodom and Gomorrah did, which means they had flesh. If they went after different flesh, then they had flesh. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. If you're a human flesh going after animal flesh, that's heterox. different from you. We get heterosexual from that, right? Homosexual, same. Heterosexual, different, right? So heterox flesh means different from. Human, animal, different. So it says the angels in Jude 6 and 7 went after strange flesh. And so here in Genesis chapter 6, verse 13, when God, Elohim, said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and I'll behold, I shall make ruin them, but watch this, with the earth. By the way, the word with, he's going to use the earth as the object from which to bring the judgment. That's what the word with means. It means to be something that, verse 13 of Genesis 6, when he says, and I will destroy them with the earth, he means from the resources of this earth that I made, I'm going to destroy you. So it wasn't by God's lightning rod or some powerful, no, he used the resources of the creation itself to destroy the creation and work of his hand. Wow. He's just remolding. It's remolding, refashioning. That's what that is. He's just resetting things. Yes?
I heard Noah at 500 with Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Isn't it possible he had offspring prior to 500 years that perished in the flood? I think all the other patriarchs, they weren't that old when they
No,
did
they weren't.
that.
No, they weren't. I know. Believe me, that's crossed my mind. Did Noah have kids prior to the age of 500? And they just weren't listed. But the thing is, though, when you talk about that, the thing is, when you go back to Genesis in chapter 10, it says the genealogy of Noah's sons, and it just mentions those.
And
So,
there's a possibility, Noah's sons, but it didn't say like Noah's daughters. It might have,
Oh, yeah.
by omission. I mean, they might have been there by omission.
Yep.
You never know.
Don't know. But for everybody else who had daughters, it would say, and he begat other sons and daughters. It never said that about Noah. It never said he had other sons and daughters. So everybody else in the genealogy in Genesis 5, it would say, so-and-so had this person and had other sons and daughters. It doesn't say that about Noah. So it's conjecture, but there's nothing really I can see. Let me go back to the Septuagint to double check to see if it says it there. I don't think it says it there either, but I'll just double check it. In because chapter 5 is where it mentions him having, and also in chapter 10. So we'll check both real quick.
Unusual for a patriarch to have to wait that long to have descendants.
It just said he had 5. It just said yeah, I know it is different, but yep. Yep. So everybody else, they had sons and daughters, but Noah's not mentioned have sons and daughters in the Septuagint either. Check chapter 10 where the genealogy is listed. I'll check again. No. So both cases where it's initially listed and where it's later on reflected upon his genealogy, neither case does it say he had other sons and daughters. So if he did, it's not recorded. So I don't.
And we
I'm
don't
gonna.
know the age of Noah's wife. Maybe she was a lot younger. We don't know.
I don't know, but I don't. When it doesn't list it like that, I don't even want to consider it. If it's not, I don't consider that because it wasn't listed. If it was listed as sons and daughters, then I would say yeah. But since it's not listed, so looking at this scripture here. So what does this mean? When he says again, he says he was okay. So here he's going to destroy or wipe out, obliterate as the Lord. This is the Lord, it says, right? But here God destroys he's going to destroy, corrupt to ruin the things that were on the earth as well. So what I'm saying to you is this, is that what's going to happen here is that the Lord in the flood, he took back the chai, which is the life of all things. On earth and under heaven. This is what I think he's saying. When he says, there's a reason why the Lord would do this. Why does he say the Chave destroys, wipes out, obliterates, but then he says God Elohim destroys, corrupts to ruin? Why the distinction of the name for God and the action? Why the distinction? And so Chave, we know, is the authoritative name for God, which is like the pre-existent one. That's like a big deal. So I contend to you that he is saying he took back the Chai life of all things on the earth. Remember, nothing's alive unless he makes it alive. He's the author and finisher of our faith. He's the author of life. He took back the energy of life itself. So then you had nothing but dead carcasses on the earth. So humans, animals, plant life just went from life to, boom, lifelessness. And then Elohim said, I'm going to corrupt that. I'm going to take all those things. So, and then God, right here, God Elohim destroys them. Destroys the physical remnant of all things, which is pretty sad. So for me, it brings a whole different image to the flood now, because it's almost like when the Lord says, I'm going to wipe out and obliterate, it's like he just took and just, it's like I'm seeing like tons of people, I don't know, millions, whatnot, and just falling lifelessly to the ground. Animals just walking, boom. And then God comes in and goes, oh, I'm not done yet. The carcasses will be taken care of. That's on me. I'm gonna destroy that to utter ruin. So all the plant life just went, doo. That's all going to be the remnant of all things. I'm taking that out with the flood. It's like, wow, which makes me makes me kind of go, wait a second. That would explain a lot why we have bones found in such deep parts of rock, because God was so stinking angry when he did this. Just saying, this wrath. You could see how the force of the water coming up, water coming down, and all these carcasses which were already laid waste were just forced into rock, and just by the torque of that. Just imagine that. Just lifeless bodies of animals and humans just being thrown around. And these hybrid offsprings, which were giants in the land, they were also.
Check your mic.
Now, was the pyramid considered pre-flood or post-flood? That pyramid, I guess, Cheops, whatever,
Post-flood.
post-flood.
There you go, sorry about that. My battery was not so good there. So the reality there is that, so God's going to have all these life source inside the humans and beasts just taken out of their lungs. They're all going to just fall to the ground. Plants are just going to die. They're just going to die instantly. And then all of a sudden, the flood comes in and just pummels them. So which now the image now is, you don't have people pounding on a door of an ark. They're not even alive. So it's like when he's not funny. He's not joking around. He obliterated. So he took away all life. There was no wipe out means to have no. you don't have any life in you. There's no life. It's not like he took like 99.9% of your life and you go. No, he took all your life. It's all gone. There's no more breath left in you. So you can't move. You can't breathe. You can't act. You can't think. You're done. So he took it all back. It's almost like a prelude to Jehoshaphat. He took the life force back to himself and said, now as Elohim, I'm going to take care of these carcasses that are left through a flood. And you can see how lifeless animals and birds and humans and giants of the land, hybrid offsprings, were just forced into sides of rocks and mountains, and we get our fossilization from that. People say, how do you explain? That's how I explain that. When you have a lifeless object being just thrown and cast by tons of force of water, it can create a lot of damage and force it into a lot of bedrock. Yes?
Lainey said the archaeologists say these bones in rock were from millions of years ago.
Okay. Yeah, I know, it's laughable. There's some books that you actually can find that will say, based on the layer in the rock that the bone is found, say layer 5, we know that the bones of this person is 6 million years old. And then it would say, you know this because that layer of the Earth's crust is 6 million years old. And then you read further on in the book about the Earth's crust, and it says, we know that the 6 layers down is 6 million years old because the fossil that was found there is 6 million years old. Huh? That's called circular reasoning. You can't, the bone can't be 6 million years old because the Earth's crust is 6 million years old. on the basis of the Earth's crust being 6 million years old, because the bone's 6 million years old. With a real truth, please stand up. That's called circular reasoning and asinine logic. You cannot do that and ask me to believe you as being sincere. That is asinine. That's just self-justification of a circular reasoning that makes no sense. You need absolute truth, not subjected to malarkey, that can prove the validation. By the way, carbon dating, it can give you a range of thousands of years difference. This is validated and factual. It's not accurate at all. That is insane. It's not accurate at all.
Teach with math that I always said we will take this as axiomatic that this is accurate, but it has been shown not to be. But we have to take it this way to do these problems.
And I have written down somewhere, I'll get you this in the scripture here. The earth used to be, I had it written down somewhere. Yeah, I don't know where it is now. It used to be written down, I had it. But the earth is slowing down. It's slowing down every year, right? It's slowing down, which means that I think it's slowing down by like 0.00, I don't know, some hundredths to the hundredth, whatever. But that means that it was going faster, right? If you just do the math equation and go back millions of years ago, it'd be spinning around so fast that nothing would be able to stay on this planet. I mean, that makes no sense, what you're saying. If the Earth's millions of years old, then while people were on it, that is, we'd just be flinging off. We just, it's just, it's insane. So it doesn't make it, plus the magnetic pull of the Earth is getting weaker, which means it was stronger. If it was stronger, there'd be a